given, handed. Our cognitive resources are things we have to develop, right? So think of the project of developing your cognitive resources. Often this is called getting an education, right? So your cognitive resources need to be developed. But developing your cognitive resources is a project. Where do you get this project from? Well, if you're a Humean, it has to come from your cognitive side, from your desires, right? So think of it this way. Go back, pretend, leave out socialization and all that stuff just for the simple. Think here you are with a bunch of desires, and if one of them isn't develop your cognitive resources, then there's no explanation for why that's what you're doing. So here you all are doing it, and now for a Humean the question is, why are all those people sitting around listening to that little guy talking? Answer, they're developing their cognitive resources. And why are they doing that? They want to. That's the crude, right? They might want to do it for all kinds of other reasons, but somehow or other their cognition has got to get onto it, otherwise you won't have an explanation for what they're doing. Now notice what happens though. Once you see that you're developing your cognitive resources is desire-driven, there's going to be this question. What happens when different desires do the driving? So let's take an obvious case, right? So you're the oligarchic man. And that means your goals are set by your necessary appetites. And what that means, filtering through, is you've come to recognize that making a lot of money is the best way to satisfy your appetites in the long term. So now when you set about developing your cognitive resources, so here you've got the college catalog, and you're riffing through it to see which courses you should take. And, right, let's simplify. You think business, right? Why? Well, that's what it seems to be about, right? And they're upfront about it. They say, you know, get a major in business and you'll be able to make a lot of money, and they tell me about what my starting salary will be, and that's music to my ears. And then I think, though, you know, I do remember somebody telling me in school that maybe I should get a broad education. Maybe I should take some art or something, you know, just something else as well. I mean, I've got to take these damn area-wide requirements and ethics, whatever that's going to be for me, right? I've got to take that stuff. So maybe I should take a look and see what they say, right? So, and when I go over to the philosophy department and I think, okay, I'm going to take a course on Kant's ethics from John Hill, so I think, okay, I'll go talk to him. And I say, so what has this got to do with making money? Am I going to make a lot of money from learning this stuff? Well, you know, you see the scenario, right? So I thought is, I might do some of these things as simply time-serving, things I have to do in order to take the business courses and get the degree because the university demands it of me, right? But equally well, of course, I might find a very convenient utilitarian in the philosophy department who says, yeah, ethics is about maximizing utility, and you think, maximizing utility? I could get my mind around that. Okay, utility, that sounds like money in a different term, so I'm for that. I want to, okay, and so but notice what I'm doing though. And the same, I go over to the art department, and you know, I'm going to take some courses because, you know, I want to be a successful businessman. I don't want to seem too narrowly business-minded. So I think art appreciation, should I take that? And I discover that actually people who know about art appreciation can make a lot of money by appreciating art. Not only can you appreciate art, but art can appreciate, right? And it's the appreciation of art in that sense that I'm in favor of, right? So I think, okay, man, that's for me. Okay, now so see what's happening though, right? And how are we to characterize it? What I want to say is first is this, that all of the concepts that I use in describing the world and myself and my place in it are all tinged by, colored by my driving goal. They have a normative dimension that's sensitive to how money will play out in terms of things. So here's what I have in mind. Right? When I use my concept of art to apply, it's got a writer attached to it. The appreciation is on art that will appreciate. And so what I attune to, what I look for, is things like articles that say, artists scoring the top prices in 2016, unappreciated artists that will appreciate. Those are articles I read, right? Because the concept of art that I've got is tied to my evaluation system generally, right? And my general evaluational attitude is financial. And that means that every concept I use has a normative tinge to it, right? And this is a thing that's come back into fashion. People think that any concept, however apparently non-normative, is in fact going to have a normative dimension. Here's a way to see how it gets its normative dimension in a very simple model, right? It gets its normative dimension because the project level goals, the structure, the ones that give the structure to the self, right? They have a certain kind of interest, and that interest colors or shapes all of the others. So the simple story I told is of someone whose entire cognitive structure, all their concepts, however, are tinged by, permeated by their driving concern, which is to make as much money as possible. So at any level, if I say, how far are you going to pursue your study of statistics? How far are you going to, the answer will always be, as far as I need to in order to make money. If taking the next level course isn't going to have any immediate payoffs, or I can't see how it would, my thought is, that's pointless. So I evaluate whole cognitive bodies of cognitive machinery by saying, well, if you can tell me how it will help me to make more money, I'll do it, but if you can't, it's just noise and I don't want to hear about it. That's a very crude example and nobody fits exactly, although you do know some people that seem to nearly fit it. And I think that that's the thought that Plato has, that when we want to look at the concepts, right, the contents of the propositional attitudes of the oligarchic man, we're going to have to give them a certain shape. The concepts that this person uses are going to be different from the concepts that the Timocrat uses. We're all heading for the rectangle, right? That's the thought. So let me give an even simpler model. So remember in the Euthyphro, Socrates says he wants a definition of piety that will do two things. It will be a reliable standard for judging which things are pious and which aren't, so we'll allow him to partition everything into two classes and to do it reliably, the pious and the impious. And he also wants to know what it is about the pious things that makes them pious, what about the impious things that makes them impious. He wants the ground of the judgment. Okay, so call that a measuring device, and actually he does talk about it this way. He says, well, when you've got a reliable measuring device, you don't get into disputes about these things. But even the gods get into disputes about values because we don't yet have a measuring device. So you reflect these things, these vague notions of conceptual nature, reflect them as measuring sticks. So think that the goal of each one of these people is to measure things, divide the world into things that are a meter long and things that aren't. That's very simple. and each one of them is going to construct a measuring stick to do the job. Right? And the more reliable the measuring stick, the better it is. So now think of your cognitive development, what you've done to develop your cognitive resources as cashing out in a measuring stick. So if you've developed your cognitive resources in one way, you'll have this measuring stick. If you do it in another way, you'll have this one. If you do it in another one, you'll have this one. And those measuring sticks have built-in norms, right? Because, right, you're saying it's right. It's correct. This is a correct measuring stick. It measures things to be a meter long, so it's got a normative dimension to it. Okay? You with me? So think of the appetitive person as driving his cognitive resources to a level at which he has a measuring stick that divides things into a meter and not a meter, but it's only reliable to degree n. So we want to measure the reliability of the meter stick. And we'll say that this one is reliable to degree n, this one to degree n plus m, and this is reliable to degree p, where p is perfect, right? So when you get this one, you've got a correct measuring stick. When you've got this one, you've got one that's pretty good. When you've got this one, you've got one that's not bad. So we don't have utter unreliability. We've got degrees of reliability. Okay? Now, that's what we want to be able to adequately reflect at the level of concepts. So what we've got to do is say, what is your concept of a horse? Well, I use my meter stick, my horse meter stick, and I measure horses, and then I build my concept of a horse on that basis, right? So in building the concept of a horse, I'm doing the equivalent for horses, what I do for meter sticks. So these are measuring devices. Let me stick with the meter before I get to the horse, okay? So originally, right, the meter or the measuring length was roughly the length of the king's arm from his elbow to the tip of his finger. That was the yard, the standard yard. And you can see that that's a lot better than eyeballing, but it's certainly not that great, right? Because, well, kings have different lengths and, you know. So the next step was to produce a piece of wood that was not first calibrated to the king's forearm, but then fixed. As the thought was, we don't go back to new kings and recalibrate. We've done it once and for all. Now we'll just use that piece of wood and we'll make copies of it that are the same length. So that's a big step. Yes? Getting to this is a big step from this, just eyeballing it. That's already a big step in reliability. And then the next step is even more reliable. We've got the meter stick. Then we reflect that the meter stick is actually subject to perturbations in temperature and pressure, and to humidity too. So now we realize that the meter stick is shrinking and expanding according to, other things that we might be able to measure, but we are not able to measure just now. So we realize that if it's very humid, would meter sticks expand, but by how much? What about with temperature, pressure? What about with the just natural contraction of the materials, right, or expansion of the materials because they're made of wood? So we think, okay, we have to do better. And what we do is we produce the standard meter. The standard meter is the platinum bar in Paris. It's got two little nicks on it, and the distance between those two nicks is specified as 1 meter. Anything that's the same length as that is a meter long, by definition. That's what it is. The standard meter is the standard. So, I don't know if you know this, but it's fascinating, I think, anyway. So the Bureau of Standards in Washington has a copy of the standard meter in France, and every so and so often, it's brought to Paris and recalibrated. Well, after all, it's crucial that these things be the same length. Well, a lot of business, a lot of money, a lot of other things are involved in how accurate your measurements are. And there's actually a rather hilarious description of all of the things that have to be done to make sure that the copy doesn't get damaged. And you can imagine there have to be 8 people carrying it and 2 carrying it to make sure. Okay. All right. So once we get to the standard meter in Paris, we've already done a huge job. But look what's happened, right? Look at all the social apparatus and structure that has to be brought to bear for there to be something like the standard meter. Right. That's vastly, as a cognitive product, the standard meter is vastly more complicated than the King's arm and the copies, right? Think about it. But that by itself is not enough either, right? Because what we realize is there's still quite a lot of give in that system. Not maybe for, millimeters, but when we get to very, very tiny differences, then we're not going to be able to accurately reflect that. And one reason is that, well, you don't have even the copy that's in the Bureau of Standards. You have a copy of that copy. You've got a standard meter stick, and maybe it's a very good one. Maybe it's been manufactured to very high tolerances, right? But even so, it's still a copy, and that means that it varies independently of the one in Washington, which varies independently of the one in Paris, and that's a lot of variance. So what we do now is, right, we have now defined the standard meter not that way, but you know how we define it now? It's the length of a wavelength of light emitted under from a special crystal, right, that you can get anywhere. You don't have to go to Paris to get it. But it's absolutely invariant. In all circumstances, when you set it up this way, that thing is 1 meter long and not anything else, right? So, and that when it was discovered, this is what the article in Nature said, invariance in nature discovered. The meter has been discovered in nature. Right? There's something in nature that is 1 meter long, and it's the wavelength of that light when okay, got it? Now, but look what you need in order to get that. You need massive technological advances. Okay, that's exactly the idea. The idea is that your standards for judgment are determined in large part by the social organizations and arrangements that the cognitive apparatus, the cognitive disciplines that are brought to bear on your mind to fill it with concepts that meet a certain level. So when your sense of the meter is, this, you've got a concept of a meter that will partition things into meter and non-meter, but only to degree n. Some things that are not a meter long will be in the meter class, and some things that aren't a meter, that are a meter long will be in the non-meter class. But it's still pretty good, right? It's not hopeless. It's reliable, but not perfectly reliable. Good for certain purposes. Fine if you're making dinner, making a suit, cutting a pair of curtains. Okay for making a bridge, not so good. Certainly not good, right, okay. Better, best. So, now think this way. What cognitive resources I have as a result of a project that's set by my ruling desires, so that my cognitive resources and the standards that are embodied in the concepts that I have are an output of the socialization of a being in whose soul those kinds of desires rule. Okay? So that's what we need to reflect. We need to see that, right? When you go around and think, that's a cat, right? You're using your concept of a cat. And if your concept of a cat is one you acquired in a normal way, right? As a result of the mere socialization of you, right? Without any special training in catology, it's okay. You'll distinguish a lot of cats from a lot of non-cats and so on. Now you go to school and you learn that actually a lot of things that you think are cats are not cats. Right? They look like cats, but they aren't. Yeah.
Can you read what's behind my shirt?
What does it say? The first cat is understood simply as a
funny looking.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. I didn't place that T-shirt on it. That's great. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's the thought is it's roughly like that. But then when you actually study cats, you learn to make finer discriminations. And if you stop at the point at which you get kind of social approval for your cat discrimination, you're still not as far as you can go, which is to find out, so to speak, what cats really are, and to use that as your standard. So think of those cognitive projects, how far you develop your cognitive resources as being driven by your ruling desires, and those ruling desires coloring or shaping your concepts so that they better achieve the ends of those desires. Not that they better achieve the truth, but they better achieve, right, the ends of those desires. So the concepts are shaped to be just the ones that will help an acquisitive person become as successful as possible, right? So if you're an appetitive person and you've made it to here, you're an oligarch, right? That's exactly what you're going to have. You're going to think sciences exist to maximize profits. Universities are for commercial purposes. Taxation should, you'll think that about everything, right? And it'll filter down to the discriminations you make at any level. So ask what a good chair is, you'll talk in terms of cost effectiveness and so forth. Ask what a really good painting is, you'll think about one that appreciates in value. Ask what a, right? That's a, move to the oligarch, or to the Timocrat, and the Timocrat is going to be different, right? The Timocrat is going to be interested in, do you think my art is good? Not, is it going to make me a lot of money? But when you see it hanging on my wall, are you going to think I'm a discriminating and sophisticated collector of painting? Are you going to value me when you see what kind of food I eat, what kind of car I drive, what kind of clothes I wear, what kind of books I read? Will you look at me and say, yes? Or will you say, loser? Oh, right? That's going to be the thought. And so my Timocratic desires are all going to be, and the goals I have in going to college, right, won't be, take the courses that maximize my financial rewards, but take the ones that will result in my being a social success. A politician, something where approval really matters and where the money is less important. Yeah.
So with the Timocrat, is it exclusively the spirited desires, or is it a balance of the spirited desires and the natural appetites?
Yeah, so what it is it's a structure in which the spirited desires determine which appetitive goals to go for.
Okay.
So for example, it'd be like this. You're sitting, you want to impress the person you've taken to dinner, and now you're going to look at the menu. And you're not going to think, what do I want on the menu? What is my appetite for? You're going to think, what will impress, right? So I go for something sophisticated to show how sophisticated I am, because that will get me approval. I want the hamburger, but that's so gauche. I can't bring myself to tell you that, so I say, I'll have the pâté de foie gras with the, right? And which wine should I order? Well, not the one I want, but I should order the one that will, right? So my appetite will get a bit satisfied. It's going to eat, right? just not what it wants. So shut up, right? You're lucky I'm feeding you. The problem- I could be on emaciation as the goal of being on, or in which case you wouldn't get anything. But that's the idea, right? So it's that, yeah, you've got all those desires, but the question is, what happens when it's time for them to be satisfied? Will they, or will they, depending? And of course, after a while, I'll have so shaped all my appetites, if I'm a Timocrat, that they won't want anything other than what will get me approval anyway. I'll just have done. Okay, let's stop and come back and see what more we have to say and talk about.